It was Independence Day, marking my 5th wedding anniversary with my partner, Emily. We had planned a getaway to the Mediterranean for the holiday, but on the morning we were set to leave, Emily hurriedly threw her stuff into her bag and told me her company needed her for an unexpected business trip. I took her at her word until late that night when I stumbled upon a tweet from Emily's first love, Liam. In the picture, they were cozy, fingers locked together, sporting matching bracelets that really popped. I forced a grin, so she did go to AG&C after all, but the guy she went with wasn't me. I didn't call her out. Instead, I liked the tweet. A minute later, Emily nervously called me. It was a misunderstanding. They just bumped into each other while on business. She promised to make it up to me next Independence Day. I smirked. It's cool. Have fun, Emily. She was confused and asked why I wasn't jealous this time. A week later, Emily came back. She walked in dragging a big suitcase. Normally, I'd rush to take it and help her switch into slippers, but this time, I didn't. Emily leaned against the door, frowning as she looked at me. Alex, where are my slippers? In the past, I always had her slippers ready for her every time she came home. But not this time. Seeing me just sitting on the couch watching TV, she asked, "They're in the shoe cabinet. You can find them yourself." Her frown deepened, but after a moment, she went to the shoe cabinet herself. She put on her slippers and approached me. Glancing at the empty dining table, she pouted. "I'm kinda hungry. Can you make me some dumplings?" Usually, if she was hungry, I'd get up late at night to make her some noodles, but today, I simply replied, "I'm tied up. Just order some takeout if you're hungry." Displeasure flashed across Emily's face as she sighed and moved closer, softening her tone. "Babe, I know the business trip upset you. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I got you a gift. Please forgive me." I stayed cool, my tone steady. "You're overthinking it. I'm not mad." Emily blinked, confused, then frowned. She pulled out a poorly wrapped present from her suitcase. When she opened it, it was a tie. With hopeful eyes, she asked, "Do you like it? I picked it out especially for you." I remembered a tweet Liam had posted 3 days ago, a promo for a mall opening during Independence Day, offering a free tie with purchases over $1,500. That same blue-green tie was now being handed to me as a thoughtful gift from Emily. I kept my disappointment hidden. Taking the gift, I said calmly, "Thanks, that's thoughtful." Seeing I had nothing more to say, Emily looked surprised. "Is that all?" I gave a brief, and asked, "What else do you want to hear?" Emily frowned, holding my arm, explaining, "Are you still upset? I already told you." Liam and I just bumped into each other on business. We only had a meal at the airport. I nodded. I know, I'm not upset. My lack of reaction seemed to catch her off guard. She stared at me in disbelief. "Why aren't you jealous this time? There's nothing to be jealous about. I've moved on." I stood up and grabbed my coat, ready to leave. Once again, Emily stepped in front of me, blocking my way, and asked, "Where are you going? What about my anniversary gift?" A month ago, I had won a blue gemstone bracelet at an auction, and Emily had seen the news about it. Unexpectedly, I picked up my phone and transferred her $4,500, replying, "I forgot to prepare it. Here's the money. Buy whatever you like." Emily immediately fell silent. For 5 years together, I had always carefully prepared gifts for her every holiday without fail. She froze for a few seconds, then angrily grabbed my hand and asked, "What about the bracelet?" I sneered, pointing at her wrist. "What bracelet? Isn't that the couple bracelet you're wearing with Liam?" Emily suddenly looked very awkward. He just gave it to me as a friend. Don't overthink it. I'll take it off right now." Having lived together for 5 years, I was very familiar with her micro-expressions. From the way she clenched the corner of her shirt, I could tell she was flustered. Since I had already lost all hope, I didn't want to say another word to her. I pinched the bridge of my nose, exhausted, and turned to leave. After 5 years together, I had always put Emily first. It had been ages since I'd seen my old friends, so I bought a plane ticket to Hong Kong to meet up with my buddies. As soon as my good friend Mike got my call, he immediately set up a dinner for us. After several rounds of drinks, Everyone stared at me before almost simultaneously saying, "We thought once you got married, you'd forget about us. But does Emily know you're here?" I took a couple of sips and smiled. From now on, you can hit me up anytime. No need to get her approval. My phone kept flashing with calls from Emily, over a dozen in total. Ever since Liam came back to the country, there had been several times Emily stayed out all night, and I'd make the same frantic calls to her. There were times I angrily questioned why I couldn't reach her, and she'd impatiently reply, "Is the sky falling?" Every time I saw you repeatedly calling, it disgusted me. Now she had become the one causing the disgust. We kept drinking and socializing late into the night. As the party was winding down, Emily hurriedly pushed the door open and walked in. She pulled out a chair and naturally sat next to me, grabbed my glass of wine, and said, "You shouldn't drown your sorrows in alcohol. Don't you know your stomach can't handle it?" For a moment, I was taken aback. Her sudden concern felt out of place. I glanced at her, my tone cold. "What are you doing here?" My friends greeted her politely, and after she responded with a smile, she tightly grasped my hand and whispered, "You wouldn't answer my calls, so I had no choice but to come find you." I angrily pulled my hand away and replied, "Emily, I've told you before, we have nothing to do with each other anymore. Please don't overstep." Emily stared at me, stunned. I pulled my friends aside and walked past her. She ran after us, shouting from behind, "Alex, I've already come to make it up to you. What more do you want? We're almost 30, and you still run off whenever we argue. Can't you be more rational?" Emily quickly got into a car and followed me to Mike's place. In the car, she tried again to talk, but I firmly rejected her. She seemed angry and embarrassed, saying, "Enough with the drama. Enough drinking. Come home with me, please. I know you're jealous, but Liam and I are completely innocent. Why hurt your body like this?" I smiled and replied, "You're mistaken. I'm drinking because I'm happy to see my friends, not because of anything else." With that, I pushed her aside and grabbed Mike, heading straight for home. No matter how hard she knocked on the door, I ignored her. That night, I slept soundly. The next morning, Mike knocked on my door and told me Emily had arrived. I got dressed and walked downstairs, where I saw Emily sitting at the dining table, her face dark and silent. I knew she was angry. In the past, if she even frowned, I'd immediately rush over to cheer her up. But this time, I didn't even look back as I walked out the door hailing a cab on the street. At the airport lounge, I ran into Emily again. She walked up to me, her voice full of anger. "Alex, we're married. You don't need to avoid me over something so small." I didn't lift my head. Still tapping on the keyboard, I replied, "You're overthinking it. I'm not avoiding you." Just as I finished, Emily's phone rang and I heard Liam's voice through the screen. "Where are you? Don't forget the party tonight. Whether we sign the deal depends on today." Since Liam divorced and returned to the country 3 years ago, Emily had frequently helped him behind my back, using me as an excuse. I thought I could ignore it, but when I saw the smile curling on her lips, I felt a sharp sting. That soft tone of hers had never been given to me. Most of the time, when she spoke to me, it was always businesslike. I had asked her before to be gentler with me. She'd always respond impatiently. The company's issues already stressed me out. "Can you stop having so many demands?" Thinking of this, I immediately lowered my head and sent 2 messages to my assistant, instructing him to inform our business partners that Emily and I were in the process of getting a divorce. After the call ended, she turned to look at me, immediately wiping away her sweet smile. "There are company matters to handle. The flights are all booked, so you'll have to give me your ticket. You can take the next one." When I remained unmoving, she repeated herself. I coldly responded, "I didn't buy a return ticket to B-City." Upon hearing that, Emily was enraged. "Alex, so all of this was just a show? You came to the airport just to tell me you're jealous? Right, you're so childish." With that, Emily turned and stormed off. I watched her walk away, a wave of bitterness rising in my chest. No matter the time or place, whenever Liam called, Emily would drop everything and rush to him. Just like the tweet he posted on New Year's Eve, True favoritism means she always chooses him, no matter what. I didn't buy a return ticket to B-City because my destination was Spain. After taking over Foo's company, my top priority was entering the supermarket business, and the land in the western suburbs was the most suitable location at the moment. Mike recommended a mentor to me, claiming he was a close friend of his father's. All I had to do was have a meal with him, and I'd learn a lot. We hit it off immediately, and during the meal, the mentor helped me clarify many of my current concerns. He took a liking to me and suggested I stay to learn at his company for 6 months. He promised that after that, I'd be able to successfully enter the supermarket business and make a name for myself. The opportunity was right in front of me, and I had no reason to refuse. After the meal, just as I was about to take the mentor back to his place, Emily's calls flooded in. I impatiently hung up several times until the mentor spoke up. "Do you need to inform your family about your trip to Spain?" He must have seen the affectionate nickname I had for Emily in my phone. I shook my head and explained, "That was for my former spouse. I've already decided to divorce her." After sending the mentor on his way, I finally returned Emily's call. As soon as she picked up, Emily directly asked, "Alex, what do you mean by this? Why did the partners tell me today they only want to meet with you about the collaboration? What's going on? Haven't I been handling all the company's affairs these years? Do you know how important tonight's collaboration is to me?" Listening to her usual commanding tone, I couldn't help but laugh. So what? Just then, I heard Liam's voice on the other end. "Emily, you have to help me with this. You're my only hope." Emily softly reassured him, "Don't worry, I've got this." I clenched my fist and slammed it hard on the steering wheel. A surge of hatred rose in my chest. Emily insisted there was nothing between them, yet she spoke to him so tenderly in front of me. When did Emily start wearing this mask of fake affection when dealing with me? It was revolting. I coldly rejected her and hung up the phone, turning it off. I stayed in Spain for 2 days. Aside from having tea and deep conversations with the mentor, I also completed the formalities for my new job and found accommodation near the company. I had my assistant inform a few business partners about my trip abroad and took the opportunity to thank them for their support over the years. At home, there were no signs of Emily's return. Everything was as usual. I took the chance to change the front door's password. After taking a day to rest, the business partners called one by one, insisting on organizing a farewell banquet for me. I couldn't turn them down, so I had to attend. The door to the private room was slightly ajar, and I could hear Liam chatting with the partners inside. I was suspicious. I hadn't expected Emily and Liam to be invited to a simple farewell banquet. I hesitated for a few seconds, but pushed the door open and walked in. Liam was sitting in the main seat, leaning against Emily. When Emily saw me, she looked up and said, "Everyone here is a friend, so just sit anywhere. The other night's banquet had some misunderstandings. Now that everyone is here, let's openly discuss anything that needs to be said." The partners all turned their eyes to me. When they saw my dark expression and my silence, they didn't say anything. Liam's eyes were full of smugness, and he smiled at me. I wasn't interested in sitting near them, so I casually pulled out a chair and sat down. Throughout the meal, Liam kept raising his glass to toast the partners, loudly discussing the bright future after the collaboration was signed. It was clear he was in a very good mood tonight. My phone also kept flashing with messages. Emily had sent me several. "Later, I'm going to announce something, so give me some face. If you have any questions, we can discuss them at home. You should be able to see now that Liam and I have nothing to hide. No need for you to worry." I kept reading, and a new message popped up. "Liam will probably get drunk tonight, so after the banquet, I might need to take him home first." I raised an eyebrow and briefly replied with, "Whatever." After several rounds of drinks, Emily saw the mood was right, stood up with Liam and announced, "From now on, Liam will be our company's newly appointed head. He'll be responsible for coordinating with all of you. So please give him your full support." At that moment, one of the business partners sitting closest to me looked puzzled and asked, "Coordinating? What coordinating? Foo's already decided to pull out of B-City." At that moment, one of the business partners sitting closest to me looked puzzled and asked, "Coordinating? What coordinating?" Foo's already decided to pull out of B City. We're all prepared to withdraw our investment. Who are you coordinating with? What? Pulling out of B City? Alex, you. Emily's face turned pale with shock. She quickly turned to me. I nodded indifferently. Yes, I plan to move Foo's business overseas. Emily's eyes widened and her expression froze. You're taking Foo's business overseas? What about me? I hadn't wanted to expose everything, thinking I could just finish the meal and end the evening on a good note. But I never expected Emily had called Liam for this purpose. What withdrawal? Why didn't I know about this? The business partner looked at me and then continued. Didn't Mr. Fu tell you? This dinner is a farewell banquet. Who knows when we'll collaborate again? Hearing this, Emily stood up in a fury and stormed over to confront me. Alex, what does that mean? Are you really going overseas? I gave her a cold look, drained my glass, and stood up. Thanks to everyone for your companionship over the years. If we have the chance, we'll meet again in the future. I turned to leave, but Emily, with red eyes, grabbed my hand and shouted, Say what you have to say before you go. When did you make this decision? Why am I only hearing about it now? Her voice was trembling with anger and disbelief. I fought to hold back my anger and shook her hand off. Enough, it's not too late to know now. My voice was cold. Seeing my impatience, Emily grabbed the nearest bottle of wine and threw it at my face. I couldn't avoid it, and the bottle crashed heavily against my head. In an instant, blood poured from my wound. I fell straight to the ground, and Mike immediately rushed to shield me. Seeing my face covered in blood, Emily seemed to panic. She hurriedly shouted, Quick, call an ambulance! Everything before my eyes turned blurry. When I closed my eyes, I could hear people's anxious voices in my ears, but my eyelids felt as heavy as lead, and I couldn't lift them. I held on until we were outside the operating room. When the doctor asked the family to sign the consent form, I tugged on Mike's sleeve and said, You go sign it. Emily, now frantic, walked up to my bed. Alex, I'm your wife. In such an urgent situation, why are you still arguing with me? I gently waved my hand and replied, No argument. In my heart, you're already my ex-wife. Before I fell unconscious, I heard her voice trembling with hysteria. I haven't agreed to a divorce. I won't divorce you. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital room hooked up to IVs. The white walls made my eyes hurt. Emily was holding my hand, fast asleep, thinking about the rage on her face yesterday when she hurt me. I couldn't help but shiver. She slowly opened her eyes and asked, How do you feel? Is there anywhere that's still uncomfortable? Hearing her concerned tone, I looked at her with suspicion. It was her who caused all this harm to me yesterday, and now she was acting like she had no idea. I forcefully shook off her hand and turned my head, unwilling to say another word to her. But to my surprise, she smiled gently and cupped my face, softly saying, Don't be angry. Last night I got emotional and accidentally hurt you. I scoffed coldly and pushed her hand away again. Maybe she didn't even realize it, but I could still smell Liam's distinctive woody fragrance on her. The scent made me sick to my stomach. Emily seemed to notice the disgust in my eyes. Alex, what do I need to do to make things like before again? I was just on a business trip. You didn't have to make a big deal out of it, did you? In the past, I always thought that as a married couple, we should maintain some face. But after Emily repeatedly trampled on my dignity, I couldn't take it anymore. Emily's phone flashed twice. She glanced at the messages, then smiled and sat by my bed, taking my hand in hers. Her tone shifted as she said, Can you call the business partners? Liam really wants this project. We'll discuss your trip abroad later, but can you help him out for now? We shouldn't involve other people in our personal matters. I hadn't expected that after I made myself so clear that day. Emily still thought I was just sulking, frowning. I responded coldly, I won't make the call. If you want to help him, you'll have to do it on your own. Before Emily could get angry, my phone rang. It was the mentor asking if I had packed everything. I told him I had been injured unexpectedly and would have to delay for a week. He reminded me to take care and then hung up. Emily looked at me in shock. "You've already made all the arrangements. You've even booked your ticket." Her voice trembled, mixed with a hint of fear. I realized and quietly murmured, "Mm-hmm." My tone was distant and cold, and upon hearing it, Emily's face turned ashen. "Alex, we're married. Do you remember you promised me that we would discuss everything together? Why are you making decisions on your own for something this big? You didn't even consult me." I forced a faint smile and responded, "Lately, you've been too busy going on trips and socializing with Liam, so I didn't have the chance to tell you." Listening to her words, I felt a mixture of emotions. When we got engaged, we promised each other to trust and discuss everything together. But since Liam's return, Emily often stayed out all night and didn't let me ask questions. Every time I tried, she would scold me with an unhappy face. "I'm an adult. Do I really have to report to you about every little thing? Your controlling tendencies are too much." In the end, I could only learn about Emily's whereabouts from Liam's Twitter. I never expected she would still use our agreement to bind me. Without a hint of shame, as soon as I finished speaking, the delivery man walked in holding a bouquet of sunflowers, the flowers I liked the most. Emily looked a bit awkward, and I knew the bouquet wasn't from her. Coincidentally, Emily had a habit of sending flowers to friends or family who were in the hospital. The moment I woke up, I looked around the room, and it was clear she hadn't shown any of that thoughtfulness toward me. After accepting the flowers, Emily awkwardly smiled and said, "Mike really is thoughtful." A sour feeling filled my chest, and tears welled up in my eyes. The person I had treated like a treasure couldn't even compare to how much my friends cared about me. How laughable. I had my assistant deliver the divorce agreement, wanting to settle everything before I left for my overseas trip. The moment Emily took the divorce papers, she tore them to shreds and threw them in my face. She didn't even bother to look at the terms. Furious, she snapped, "Alex, it's one thing to be jealous, but I hold many of the company's core secrets. If you want a divorce, think carefully about the consequences first. We've been married for 5 years. Some things can be worked through. I suggest you calm down and come find me later." With that, she turned and stormed off, watching her furious back. I couldn't help but let out a deep sigh. I honestly didn't know why I had chased after her so relentlessly in the beginning. The first time I met Emily was on the first day of university. She was standing at the school gate in a white dress, hesitating. I happened to pass by and she grabbed my arm. She cautiously asked if I could help her. As her suitcase was broken, I was captivated by the deep dimples at the corners of her mouth. Normally, I wasn't the type to help others. But that day, even though I was in a rush to the auditorium for rehearsal, I didn't hesitate to help her carry her luggage back to her dorm. She took out a package of local specialties from her suitcase as a thank you gift and asked for my contact information. Later, we both joined the student council and became closer. We would have meals together, watch movies, and study at the library. I noticed she often ate only vegetables, and not long after the semester began, she started looking for part-time jobs off campus. I couldn't help but ask if she was having financial difficulties. At first, she didn't want to tell me the truth about her family situation, but not long after, she came to me crying, asking to borrow money for her father's urgent surgery. Without hesitation, I transferred the money to her. From then on, I gave Emily a supplementary card so she could live a little better. At first, she was reluctant to use my money, but later, when her father's condition worsened, she borrowed money from me twice and eventually began using my card regularly. Perhaps she had gotten used to my support, which is why she became bolder, expecting me to help with everything she did. I could see that Emily wouldn't divorce easily, but time wasn't on my side. That evening, I received a call from property management. Emily couldn't get into the house and had been arguing with them, even calling a locksmith. Phoo, I had told property management days ago not to let Emily enter my house. On the other end of the line, I could hear her shouting, "I'm the owner. Why can't I change the lock? You don't have the right to stop me." Hearing her shrill, combative voice, I rubbed my temples in frustration and decided to go back. I would also take the opportunity to discuss the divorce once more. By the time I reached the door, the police had already arrived. I was the one who called them. When Emily saw me return, She grabbed my wrist and tried to justify herself. "He's my husband. We've just had some recent arguments. He secretly changed the password. He's been injured and is in the hospital. I didn't want to disturb him, so I called Fu to change the lock." I frowned and impatiently interrupted her. "We're already in the process of getting divorced. We're no longer a couple. You have no right to enter my home, let alone change the locks." As soon as I finished speaking, Emily flew into a rage. "This house is marital property. I have half ownership. You don't have the right to kick me out without a word. Did you forget what you promised me when we got engaged? You said everything you have is mine." I shook my head helplessly. "Emily, I hope you understand. The reason I was willing to give you everything was because I loved you. But no one will tolerate repeated infidelity and still love you." After I spoke those words, Emily's eyes reddened and she grabbed my clothes, shouting, "I don't care. This is my home. You open the door now. I'm going to get my things." Originally, I had intended to set a time for her to pack up her things, but given the situation, I agreed. However, once she got inside, she immediately locked herself in her room and refused to move. I was getting frustrated and knocked on the door, reminding her, "I'll give you 3 hours. I need to go back to the hospital, so hurry up and pack your things." I sat quietly on the couch, and an hour later, the doorbell rang. I struggled to get up from the couch and opened the door to see Liam standing there. He was holding a transparent bag, inside of which was a pink rabbit ear pajama. He glanced behind me and asked, "Has Emily come back?" I noticed a faint pink mark on Liam's neck and didn't feel like responding. I was about to close the door, but he stepped forward and stopped me. I suppressed my anger and asked, "What are you doing?" Liam smiled and handed me the bag. "This is something Emily left in my suitcase the other day. I was worried she wouldn't find it, so I brought it over today on my way." Even though I had decided to completely end things with Emily, seeing her intimate clothing in another man's suitcase still made me uneasy. I pointed behind me. "She's in her room. You can go up and take her now if you want to have a chat." At this, his smug expression faltered, and a look of guilt flashed in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. "Alex, don't misunderstand. Emily and I are not like you think." Before he could finish, I shoved him aside and said, "I'm going back to the hospital. You should hurry up and take her with you." Just as I was about to close the door, Emily ran over and shouted frantically, "Why do you have to be so harsh? I've explained it so many times. Liam and I have nothing going on. Why do you always have to be so aggressive? Alex, when you're discharged, we need to have a serious talk." The door slammed shut with a bang, and I pressed my lips tightly together, saying nothing. I called a cab and gave the driver the address for the hospital, closing my eyes in exhaustion. I spent another 3 days in the hospital. What shocked me even more was that Emily began driving 40 minutes every day to visit me. She would stay all day, only leaving when the sun set. I asked her to leave, but she refused. "Alex, I'm doing this to show you that I really care about you. I don't want to be apart from you. I hope you'll reconsider going abroad." I called her crazy and accused her of not understanding a word I said, but Emily still did as she pleased. In an attempt to stop her, I tried to communicate with the hospital to refuse her visits. However, the nurse informed me that Emily hadn't been causing any disturbances and was allowed to visit whenever she wished. I arranged for 2 security guards to stand outside my door, but when she couldn't get in, she called the police. After showing the police our marriage certificate, they gave us a few words of advice and told us not to waste public resources. Exhausted, I decided to give up the struggle and focus on recovering. Emily mistakenly thought I might change my mind, and after that, she became even more desperate to show me how good she was. To make it in time for my flight to Spain, I checked out of the hospital on the evening of the 6th day. Emily had something to take care of, so she said she'd come later. When I got home, I was busy packing my bags and didn't notice my phone constantly flashing. It wasn't until Emily angrily knocked on my door that I realized it was already quite late. I opened the door and shoved 3 large suitcases in front of her. Emily, looking shocked, asked, "What is this supposed to mean?" I coldly replied, "I packed up all your clothes. Take them with you." Her face showed hesitation and she stammered, You went into my closet. I snorted and pointed to the suitcases. I put your wooden box in there. In 5 years together, I had never stepped into Emily's closet. And I never knew she kept the wooden box in such a conspicuous place. Inside it was a yellow diary, detailing how 18-year-old Emily had felt about Liam. Every word was full of affection. The diary also contained a photo of Liam's profile, clearly kept with great care. Seeing my darkened expression, Emily hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand. I haven't opened the box since it was placed there. Liam and I are not enough, Emily. I don't want to hear another word about you and Liam." I directly shoved her and the 3 suitcases out the door. That night, Emily didn't leave, and I stayed in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the moonlight all night. I watched her downstairs and kept wondering, when did things between us change? Maybe it started when Liam and I both noticed the same watch. Emily had told me the day before that she had bought the limited edition Maya watch, but when she returned from her business trip the next day, she claimed she hadn't been able to get it. When I pressed her about it, she impatiently told me, "I misspoke yesterday. I didn't get it after all." But how did that watch end up in Liam's hands? At his company's grand opening, everyone praised his incredible ability, even managing to acquire such a difficult-to-get watch. Emily probably thought I didn't know about any of this. But ever since I decided to part ways with her, I had people investigating, though I had mentally prepared myself. When the evidence was laid out in front of me, my heart still hurt for a long time. At that moment, I suddenly felt thankful that Emily and I didn't have any children. Over the past 5 years, at every social gathering, the topic of children always came up. Emily would always say I was too busy with work and hadn't considered it yet. In front of everyone, I would always give her face and agree that it was indeed my fault. But deep down, Emily knew that it was she who had always refused to have children with me. The diary said that she only wanted to have children with one person in her lifetime. I knew. In the end, I was never the one she truly wanted. Before I left, I had the security guards escort Emily, who had been sitting there all night, out of the building. As the car passed the security office, our eyes met at that moment. I suddenly realized that the girl who used to stir my emotions with every frown and smile now looked so worn out that she couldn't make my heart ache even a little. So this is what it feels like to stop loving someone. Before the plane took off, I gave Emily a big gift. I had my assistant deliver to her all the information I had gathered about Liam. This included details about Liam's affairs with 2 other women. After returning to B-City, Liam had always told Emily his divorce was because of his ex-wife's infidelity. But the unfaithful one wasn't his ex-wife. Liam had been using Emily all along, slowly making her willing to open a company for him, bring in business, and even give herself up. I had a video call with Liam's ex-wife who gave me a lot of evidence. She had one condition. She wanted to see Liam get the punishment he deserved. As the saying goes, if you want to keep something hidden, you must never do it yourself. Liam's company's finances had been in disarray for the past 2 years, so I reported him and also filed a lawsuit to demand that the money Emily spent on his company be returned. After more than 10 hours of flying, I turned my phone back on, and it was flooded with unread messages. Most of them were from Emily. I didn't respond to any of them. It was all over now. By now, Emily should have seen the evidence and received the court summons. She was unwilling to sign, so I had no choice but to take the divorce to court. I successfully started working at my mentor's company. And a month later, our divorce trial was scheduled. I had to go back once more. On the day of the trial, I saw Emily, whose eyes were sunken and face dull. In just a month, I almost couldn't recognize her. When she saw me, her emotions were intense and her eyes sparkled. She shouted loudly, "Alex!" I calmly lifted my eyes, and the coldness in my gaze made her heart tighten. She couldn't finish her sentence because the evidence I provided was sufficient. The court directly ruled that Emily would leave the marriage with nothing. After Liam was arrested for tax evasion, he pushed all the responsibility for compensation onto Emily. After hearing the court's decision, Emily slumped down in her chair. Before leaving, I gave her one last cold look. Her face turned pale. As expected, she still called out to me, "Alex, can you not take that money? You know I can't come up with that much." I still remembered the first year after we got married when she had an argument with a woman at a beauty salon simply because the woman accidentally stepped on her new shoes. She demanded a public apology and compensation. When I received her call, I bought the beauty salon as she had requested to back her up. Back then, I pampered Emily to the extreme. Even when friends who knew about it said I was being unreasonable, I didn't care. All I thought about was how good Emily was. And if she asked for anything, I would go to any lengths to give it to her, even if she wanted the stars in the sky. I would find a way to get her a ladder. But now, when I heard her pleading, I didn't even want to look back. "Alex, please help me. Can you?" Seeing that I didn't speak, she continued, "Emily, compared to the harm you've done to me over these years, this doesn't even matter." Her voice trembled as she defended herself. "Alex, I know I was wrong. Horribly wrong. But I really love you. You have to believe me." At this point, I couldn't believe Emily still used the word love to speak to me. How ironic. She had chosen to betray me because the men she had been hiding in her heart had returned. She pretended to love me now because she couldn't repay the money she owed me. I didn't know if there was anything Emily wouldn't say or do. My heart sank to the bottom, and I shook my head with a sigh before walking straight out. Afterwards, I looked up at the clear sky and couldn't help but think today, my 5-year marriage had finally come to an end. That night, Mike video called me after I arrived in Spain. He asked, "Do you regret it?" I knew what he meant. Foo Corporation was the legacy my parents left me, and my decision to withdraw from B-City was indeed a shocking one for everyone. But they were wrong. I didn't leave because of Emily. My romantic mindset had awakened long ago. What I truly wanted was to make the legacy my parents left me better and ensure it would go further. 6 months later, I opened a new company in Spain. On the opening day, I saw Emily in the crowd at the back. During these 6 months, Emily hadn't repaid a single penny. I knew her ability had limits. I didn't push her. I always thought that having something was better than having nothing. Though Emily hadn't repaid the full amount, I had to maintain some form of contact with her. Every time I received her transfer notification, I couldn't help but sigh. In the long passage of time, there are always 1 or 2 people who push you forward and force you to grow. After the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I didn't go to Emily to greet her. At that moment, standing by my side was the daughter of my mentor. She had been with me all this time, helping me get familiar with the streets of Spain. It was she who always showed up whenever I was discouraged, telling me to be brave. I remember that after many times I got drunk, she would say the same thing to me. "You have to believe you're a good person." After the marriage with Emily ended, I truly closed off my heart, thinking I would live alone forever. She appeared just in time, bringing me a lot of joy. I naturally held her hand and, in front of everyone, knelt on one knee and pulled out a diamond ring. It was custom made by a niche designer she loved a month ago. I promised her that I would give her an answer on the day the company opened, and I didn't want to go back on my word. I didn't want to lose a girl who thought only of me. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, and said, "I do." Emily, standing behind the crowd, also had tears in her eyes. I knew she'd been secretly checking my social media, but I couldn't give her any response. My job was to walk my future path more steadily and brilliantly. I embraced my new girlfriend with applause from everyone, whispering in her ear, "Thank you for appearing in my life." As soon as the words left my mouth, Emily turned away, wiping her tears and leaving. This time, I couldn't even bring myself to say goodbye to her. I hoped that in the long course of time, we would never meet again.